Okay. I hope you're seeing the slide.
Yep.
Yes.
So we're going to start when we talked about the great romance in 1806 between the commandant's daughter in San Francisco and the Russian uh, um, Duke who came down in search of food for Sitka. And we were doing Sitka, the Sitka story to celebrate Putin and Trump's summit. So the name Arguella, which is also the name of a street in San Francisco that appropriately goes all the way out to Presidio. We weren't sure about this umlaut. Well, our intrepid Jim Teisel ran it down, and it's not called an umlaut in Spanish. It's called a diaeresis. Um, and what it does to the U is turn it into a GUI sound. So just in contrast, thank you. Just in contrast, Guero is straightforward. It doesn't have an umlaut. But contrast that with the word for a penguin, which is pinguino. Does that sound right? Anyway, that's the umlaut. And then we had another thing to run down. Bob Oxenberg, we were wondering if Putin, when he was in Alaska, did anything else than meet with Trump. And we remembered in World War II that the Russians helped us defend Alaska. Remember the Japanese had captured the last island in the little tail that comes off of Alaska, the Aleutians. And apparently, a Soviet plane crashed in the defense of that last little island. And so Putin was there. This is a YouTube, and I just did a screenshot to catch that. But you could watch the whole thing if you wanted to. Here's an oddity, a topical, sort of tongue-in-cheek. Trump is visiting UK, and rumor is he's going to go back to Scotland. He's been there once before. Why? Because his mother was born on the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides. Well, that's where my mother's family was from, and also, so I have something in common with Scotland, a distant, in my case, very distant, through my mother's family tree, the island of Barra, at the very south of the Hebrides, and Lewis is the very north. So there's a little oddity for you. Okay, so we're going to do two local stories. The first is today there's a recall election over in San Francisco. And the people in the Sunset are very angry with their local member of the Board of Supervisors. They're calling him a wuss and a dictator and a liar, really bad things. The Economist reporter went to this rally, saw this dog with a placard on his back, and right after he took this picture, the dog laid down a turd, which he thought was typical of American democracy. And what's the beef that the people of the Sunset have? Well, the Great Highway, which used to provide a highway for people going north to south along the beach, is being turned into a park. And that was supported in a referendum in San Francisco, and that was last November, almost a year ago. And so the citywide referendum approved it. But the local Sunset District rejected it because of it's going to divert traffic, north-south traffic, through their neighborhood. Um, and the local representative actually was in the coalition that came up with the idea and sent it to everybody for the referendum. Um, so um, the Economist says this is typical for the over-reliance in America on direct democracy. And certainly that's been a problem with NIMBYs, not in my backyard. And that has stopped projects cold, especially the environmental approvals that needed to be done. So uh, uh, this book by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson called Abundance pointed out that that is a real problem for Democrats in big cities. They're not getting anything done. And so this counter movement called Yes in My Backyard, the YIMBY Coalition, um, uh, attracted the local representative for the Sunset. And he thinks that the NIMBYs are excessively afraid of height and density. Well, here in Walnut Creek, we had the same problem 10 years ago. And in Lafayette, they still have this problem with a big vacant lot across from Akalani's High School in Lafayette. Um, so it's not just San Francisco. And the local representative said, look, apartment buildings don't ruin neighborhoods. And this has uh, uh, international implications. What are they? Well, city planning departments all across the United States are teaching if we're going to attack global warming, we've got to stop building suburbs, which are the most
Yeah.
inefficient use of energy. And to support a suburb requires a lot more greenhouse gases being emitted. So has global implications. Um, so this is the local representative, the poor guy in Guardia who's facing a recall today. And so uh, we'll see if he can survive this betrayal that his local constituency uh, has against him. And the question is, I think there's 9 supervisors in San Francisco, and what is the minimum size of a political unit? If the whole city can decide something, does the 1/9 of the city most affected have a veto? Uh, now, Homer couldn't be with us today, but he's weighed in and he makes a point that he thinks has been ignored. the geology of the Great Highway. It's on sand, right? Being right there on the beach, um, and for it's too unstable for a highway, and it's very expensive to maintain it. So thanks for Homer. He thinks this issue has not been discussed enough. So NIMBY backlash, and what do the NIMBYs want? They're saying we want democracy, we want participatory democracy, more meetings. Well, that's what the authors of Abundance think is exactly the problem. Upzoning shouldn't be a dirty word. The NIMBYs are calling this gentrification, but um, I don't know, where do I come down. I guess I feel sorry for Ingardio, um, but the recall. So the Economist is saying Americans have too much in the way of recalls and referendums and propositions. So, what's the history of that? And it's interesting because California has been in the forefront. And this is eventually, we're going to get back to the history of California. But it's important. So, uh, internationally, the Swiss were ahead on these local democracies, but they didn't do recalls. And South Dakota, they weighed in with referendums and propositions in 1898, but they didn't do recalls. Ditto Oregon. But in 1903, it was the Los Angeles City Council that was the first government entity in the world to allow for recalls of previously elected politicians. Um, and then California adopted everything, the whole trifecta, in 1911. When we get to 1911, we'll learn that California was the birthplace of the progressive movement, which eventually um, led to a national movement, the progressives. Um, so who was the politician that did it? It was this guy, John Randolph Haynes. He was a remarkable guy. He was a doctor, physician, had the most successful medical practice in Los Angeles, and was gifted with charm, and that led to increased prestige. And he also made a ton of money in real estate. So he became a natural leader in political reform. But the Economist points out the unintended consequences. Yeah, Haynes and Hiram Johnson, they were going up against the Southern Pacific, the railroad bosses, and the Gilded Age. And so it was all these tools were meant to blunt the local California power of the Southern Pacific that had captured the legislature and was bossing everybody around. Now, today, The Economist says these instruments of reform, they're being used more to deflect blame and try to weaken political opponents. And here's some examples. You remember Gray Davis? Poor Gray Davis. He got taken to the cleaners on energy in 2003 by Enron. It was they were brokers and selling Energy, a Texas outfit, which explains the presence of president at that time, George Bush. And Davis was, tongue in cheek, terminated by Schwarzenegger. Um, so they think that this abuse of these instruments has become a contagion. The latest example was just as a matter of harassment, the Republicans tried to recall Gavin Newsom, and he won, I think, like 3-1. It was just harassment. But this wasn't harassment. The school board in San Francisco was recalled, and they had gone ultra woke. They were erasing George Washington and Lincoln. There's a Lincoln High School. They changed the name because why? Lincoln was involved in fighting the Black Sioux revolt, against Native Americans, and Oakland just last year ousted a mayor and the county's top prosecutor. I'm not in a position to say whether that was good or bad. That there's a certain amount of chaos with this. Um, so on to the second thing, which I'm sneaking in under the cover of the history of three pioneer doctors beginning in 1830. But I prepared this part of this for my reunion on Saturday, where I gave a portion of this talk. Pepper was there. Rudy helped me prepare, even though he's not here today. He and Iko helped prepare some signs. So for a crowd control, I also, in addition to giving a talk, organized some discussion groups of people with common interests at the reunion. Um, and also at the reunion, my other neighbor taught me how to use Google Forms, a way to survey people online. And I think I will use that to get your preference on directions that our study group should go in. So coming soon. Uh, all right, so the 75th anniversary of teaching primary care in 1950 to current, but I only covered the first 50 years. History doesn't really crystallize until 20 years, 25 years maybe, after time has passed. So I covered, we were a general practice residency for the first 25 years created by this guy, and we converted to family practice in 1975. So 75 years. And this is the George Dagnan I knew when I arrived in 1972. But I'm going to be telling his story. And I'm calling him a pioneer because he was the first certified surgeon on this side of the Caldecott Tunnel, on the east side of the Caldecott Tunnel. But before him, there were two other pioneer doctors that I think are more general interest. This is John Marsh, and so if any of you have driven around Contra Costa Co, you would encounter Marsh Creek Road. He arrived in 1830 when this was Mexico. And why did he come to Mexico? He had to. He fled the United States because he was an outlaw, uh, and he was not a doctor, but he had graduated for Harvard and wanted to be a doctor, but his father wouldn't pay for it. So he apprenticed himself to as an army surgeon in Minnesota. And his story is he fell in love with a Native American woman and started running guns to her tribe. And he was discovered, and he fled to Mexico, which was here, Alta California. And remember, only in 1830, only 100 people in all of Upper California could read, only 100. So he had his diploma from Harvard, and he had learned a lot as an apprentice to an army surgeon. So
Wow.
he hung up that certificate, and people took him to be a licensed doctor, but he wasn't. Um, so he arrived in the 1830s. Long story short, he eventually had enough money to buy Las Maganas Rancho, which at that time was all of East County, all of East County. Pittsburgh, Antioch, Brentwood. It was his.
Wow.
It was his rancho, um, and he was able to build this house. And I'm saying it's the house that Quinine built, and Gold, but Quinine. How did Quinine help him? Well, the locally a local Native American tribe was hostile. And the guy who owned the rancho before just threw up his hands. He couldn't make a go of it with the Native Americans constantly rustling his cattle. And Marsh was a pretty courageous guy. So he went out to the Native American camp, and he could see that there were people with shaking chills in the camp. He couldn't help but notice a few just lying on the ground, shaking. And that was because they had malaria. In the
Oh,
1830s, the Anopheles mosquito was running loose in East County. And so he knew what to do for malaria. He went and backed and got some quinine and came back to the Indian village and said, I think I can help you. And he cured their malaria and won their trust, and they helped him grow his cattle herd instead of depleting it. And when gold was discovered in 1848, 49, he was ideally located right on the delta. He just marched his cattle onto flatboats and made so much money that he could build this, what was at that time a mansion, which still stands. And it is in development to eventually become a state park. But it stood that being made of stone stood the test of time. Um,
wow.
so he he collected a lot of money. What do you do with your money in those days? Well, uh, there may be some gold buried out there in this near this house and near Brentwood. So if I had a metal detector, and I might go out there and kind of snoop around. But he was on his way to uh, San Francisco to deposit money in a bank in San Francisco. The nearest bank would have been in San Francisco um, uh, in the 1850s. And on the way there, he was murdered. This is the marker on Pacheco Boulevard that I've passed many a time. And it always pays to stop and look and read a historical marker because and they they give him the benefit of the doubt and refer to him as doctor. But in 1856, he was murdered here on his way to San Francisco. No doubt he was carrying gold. Um, the second pioneer doctor is this a Polish immigrant who came to Martinez in 1852. Um, he was from Poland, and like Frederick Chopin, he had to leave Poland in 1830. Why? The Russians are coming. The Russians, poor Poland was always under the thumb of the Russians, and Poland was divided many times between Russia and Austro-Hungary and Germany. But when Chopin died, um, his heart was taken back to Warsaw and deposited in the walls of this church where Iko and I visited. And when we were there, we also saw these remarkable benches that you sit on them, and a Chopin piece of music starts playing from inside the workings of this uh, bench. Strenzel also had horticultural skills, which he had picked up in a medical school in Hungary. And he applied those skills and he accumulated his wealth, and he also built a house, a wonderful house that if you've been to John Muir National Park, you would call it the John Muir House. But he built it, Strenzel. And it's called the John Muir House because John Muir married Strenzel's daughter, Louisa. And uh, working in Martinez, if you had an extra couple of hours, one of the walks you could take to break the day is on Mount Wanda, and one of these girls is Wanda of Mount Wanda fame. So Louisa had worked um, the Strenzel's fruit trees and vegetable gardens and loaded them on the wagon and would take it down to the Martinez waterfront and load it onto a ferry. And all through the 1850s, 60s, 70s. And this mural, I asked the residents and the doctors that work at our hospital, you've passed this mural many times. And they say, what? No, I haven't. Yes, you have, because there's 6 panels telling the history of Martinez on the Highway 4 underpass. And you can get to them by parking in the John Muir National Park parking lot and walking down and view these murals up close. So there's history that's local, that's interesting. You just have to stop and look at the marker, and if you see something off the side of the road, find a place to park, take a look. So this is John Muir when he married Louisa in 1880, and they were set up by mutual friends. It's unclear how happy they were. But he was 40 and he'd just been wandering around Yosemite, a real hippie. And she was a spinster destined for a lonely lifetime, I guess, in those days. But she was educated. Strenzel gave her a good education, and she was cultured. Um, so this is the family gravesite, which isn't far from Mount Wanda, and this is John Strenzel's marker, Big Daddy, John Muir's father-in-law. Over here is Louisa and John buried. Um,
So I didn't think it would.
so Martinez had a world famous guy. There's a famous. I was gonna put in a photo of John Muir and Teddy Roosevelt. I couldn't find it. But he was world famous, palling around with presidents. But there was another, the year he died in 1914, there was a little baby that was born in this cabin that was destined to also become world famous. This little cabin was down on the waterfront. You just saw that picture of the Martinez waterfront. And he was of a Sicilian immigrant family that had that were fishermen, and his name. I always stop to ask. Anybody want to guess who that could be?
DiMaggio.
Joe
There you,
DiMaggio.
there you go. There you go. So, and then, so Strenzel and John Muir, if they looked out this window north, they would have seen the first county hospital. How's that for a segue? And it was built in the 1880s, about the time Strenzel built his big house. Um, and the thing I want to point out are these eucalyptus trees, which are no doubt meant as a windbreak, and they still exist. This is from a little bit different angle, but a few of these eucalyptus trees remain, and it's interesting because this was where all the teenagers in Martinez would go and hang out to get away from their parents. There's a wonderful novel set during World War II that involves the young girls going up here and celebrating the illusion mysteries from ancient Greece. And other groups did Wiccan ceremonies. So it's a gathering place for teenagers in Martinez. So this is a close-up of the infirmary, and it was probably mostly to house tuberculosis victims in those days. This is the second county hospital that was built by Shell. So if you've gone up through Martinez, you see a lot of refineries. And if you've ever seen the movie There Will Be Blood with Daniel Day-Lewis, you'll understand, because that's about the discovery of oil in the Central Valley, which really determined that in the long run that California was going to have a car culture and automobiles. Without oil, that would have been impossible. So Shell wanted a hospital where they could take their workers. And this was the doctor that came in 1914. His name was Merrithew, and the hospital for a couple of decades was called Merrithew Hospital, Knott County hospital. And that's because he delivered a member of the Board of Supervisors who wanted to honor the doctor who delivered her. But he hung out until 1947, but it was tough in the final years. Uh, um, he'd seen problems before. He was an intern during the San Francisco 1906 earthquake, made rounds here. Where's this? Golden Gate Park. That was the one safe place to have a tent hospital. Um, the descendants of Merrithew gave me this slide that they had. And so Merrithew was hanging on by his fingernails in 1947, overwhelmed by the oil refineries, the steel mill in Pittsburgh, and the shipyards in Richmond. So the county population had boomed, and he couldn't do it. So he was glad, and it was time to retire. And this is when the third pioneer doctor, the first board certified surgeon east of the Caldecott Tunnel. That's when he arrived to take over from Merrithew and become the county medical officer and be the only doctor at the hospital for a spell. He was quite a guy. He loved ships, and he had moved. His family had moved him to Richmond when he started high school so he'd be able to go to a good high school. He was born in Chico, and he moved down to Richmond for high school. And he fell in love with the wharf. And in particular, the yacht club. He obviously he liked working on the waterfront, and he could get jobs at the yacht club quite handily, helping with ship maintenance. And when he graduated, he got a football scholarship to UC Berkeley. His family had very little money. And then he went to McGill Medical School in Montreal. I make the point, and you'll see that our residency program has had a strong global focus. And I make the argument that this is the first link in that chain. He left the country to go to medical school, and it also imbued him with a more public approach to healthcare. So Canada has a single payer, and Britain, of course, has the National Health Service. So that really influenced him a lot. He finished medical school at McGill, and he got a residency in internal medicine, very prestigious. But before he started his residency, and this was in 1939, he got married. And how he got married was interesting. He, as I said, worked at the Richmond Yacht Club, and a very wealthy man with a yacht had a son who was suffering with polio. And this man approached George Degnan and said, well, you're a medical student and you know how to sail. Could you teach my son how to navigate around a sailboat with partially paralyzed legs? And George Degnan agreed to do that. But they went down to the Channel Islands because of the water there was easier to teach partially paralyzed young man how to sail. And so they went to Santa Catalina. They were in the port at Avalon, and he was in the boat with this his student and sailing, and another big yacht pulls in, and the it's from a very rich family in San Francisco. They had made all their money rebuilding San Francisco after the earthquake. They had a young daughter, and she looked down at Dr. Dignan and fell in love at first sight. And so they had a mad courtship back up in San Francisco before he had to go back to Montreal for his last year of medical school. And she said, "I'm coming with you." And they were rich enough that she could rent out a suite in the best hotel in Montreal. And all of a sudden, George Dagan's lifestyle took a giant leap forward. So they got married. It was a big society wedding. And his the wedding present from his new father-in-law was a lifetime membership at the St. Francis Yacht Club down in the Marina. And we never could quite understand it, but whenever a graduating class of residents uh, uh, finished in June, he would take all the graduates to the St. Francis Yacht Club, and we couldn't understand why everybody knew him. Uh, what? You've been at this hospital since 1947. How could you know that? So he did, and then what happened? He quit after 1 year his UCSF residency to train as a surgeon in Britain. And the dean was, George was a star resident. He said, "What are you doing? Are you hearing voices?" Tongue in cheek. And he had. It was his father-in-law, who was Jewish, and in 1940 was hearing really bad things about what was going on in Europe. So he decided to respond and go to Europe and switch his specialty from internal medicine to surgery and trauma surgery. Um, of course, that's what his father-in-law wanted him to do, but his new wife was pregnant and was, none, to say the least, ambivalent. But off he went, and he technically was in the Canadian Air Force. He got a couple of years as a crash course at being the war in trauma surgery in Edinburgh, and then he went down to London and operated in tents and had the recovery wards were in public buildings. But at the end of the war, he'd been away for 7 years, and his marriage did not survive that. He was certified by the Royal College of Surgeons. The daughter that he had, who he hadn't seen in 7 years, went on to become a psychologist. They had named her Aubrey after George Dagnan's mother's maiden name. So she kept the name Dagnan the rest of her life. She founded a literary magazine, the San Francisco Review, mostly in support of her brother, who got a Pulitzer Prize in 1969. But he had abandoned poetry in the 1930s to fight fascism, actually joined the Communist Party along with Oppenheimer's brother, as we saw in the movie. And After the war, there was the Red Scare, and he, being a communist, had to flee to Mexico, just like John Marsh. But he returned to America in 1958, resumed writing poetry, and got the Pulitzer Prize. So, about the time his brother-in-law was leaving for Mexico, George Degnan was also overwhelmed, which is why he started the residency. He liked to quip, I exchanged my teaching for slave labor, and we worked pretty hard still in the 1970s. This was the oldest of our alums. He was going to come at the age of 98, but he didn't quite make it because he had some increased problems with mobility. But when he was there, that was when the third hospital was built. But this is his graduating class. And George is still the only doctor. And so it's 7 years of being the only doctor, but at least he had slave labor. He had requested a pathologist, almost one of his first requests to expand hospital staff. He wanted to know what kind of tumors. He wanted to have autopsies available to him. And he was resisted by the Board of Supervisors. They said, just treat the living, okay? And so he finally got some help. These were all veterans of World War II. We had a reunion in 2010, and they had remarkable stories. Brian Lee was in the CIA and was parachuted into Western China behind Japanese lines. This fellow got the Silver Star for in the Battle of the Bulge. Remarkable guys, and we got interviews with them. He was Jim Lynch was the one who accepted me into the residency. And this was our 2010 reunion with the fellows from the 1950s and 60s. So Degnan was a very good administrator in the sense that he understood population-based medicine from his time in Canada and Great Britain. And he set up a system after discharge so patients could get follow-up. 3 large regional clinics, East, Central, and West. And he was always in favor of universal access. And he believed you had to be involved politically. And he partnered with George Miller Jr., not to be confused with George Miller III, who will be coming up. He was Degnan's political mentor and ally. He was a power in Sacramento, chairman of the finance committee, and Pat Brown's campaign manager. Pat Brown was Jerry Brown's father. They were both governors, and both were governors twice over. Best politician, and here he is in the Oval Office, and they with Dr. Degnan, they set up the George Miller Centers for families of physically and mentally challenged kids, so that the parents could get respite and be able to work. He saw this as a need, at least as strong as the surgical needs. So he had insight. His mentor, George Miller Jr., died suddenly. This bridge, which had been built in 1962, was renamed in his honor. And it was a two-way bridge until 2007. Dr. Degnan continued in the 70s with innovations, added small clinics, and came up with the idea of prepayment and capitation. And uh, it led to our hospital being the first federally qualified state licensed county sponsored HMO in the whole country. So he was a pioneer. Of course, he got the idea for prepayment from the fellow that was running the Richmond shipyards and hiring Rosie the Riveter, Henry Kaiser. So Kaiser Hospitals, the Kaiser system. Also on the Richmond waterfront. Of course, Degnan would have known about prepayment. And Kaiser thought that their model could be the model for the whole country, and I agree. So the Millers in the Oval Office, I showed this one of George Miller Jr. Now George Miller the third is there. He was Nancy Pelosi's right-hand man when they were doing Obamacare. And he could whisper into Obama's ear for sure. In the showcase in one of our clinic buildings is this note that Barack Obama wrote to George Miller III, who's standing back there. I couldn't have done it without you, George. So it's understandable that George Miller III entered a tribute to Dr. Degnan in the congressional record. And here's what it says. This is 1991. My entrusted friend, valued advisor to both my father and me, instrumental. He acknowledges the healthcare systems. Is a pioneer in creating our county services and joined me in paying tribute. And here's a quote from Degnan. Unless we plan to shoot everybody who's sick, we have to try to rectify the deficiency. And we have to take care of our neighbor. Very, very nice sentiments. How am I doing on time, Michael? I thought so. So I think this will probably be a good place to stop.
Hmm.
Oh, this is just to finish up. So this was the two-way bridge honored for George Miller Jr. And this bridge, when it was built, each one became one way. This one north to south, the new one going south to north. We've all been on the bridges. By the way, here's one of the surviving Victory ships that have been mothballed. They kept one just to remind us. And this is the only father-son bridge pair in the country. uh, that's the railroad bridge, the bridge in between that was built in 1935. I don't know if you know Port Costa, but this is the bridge that closed Port Costa. All the that Port Costa was the dead end of the train where the train was cargo was offloaded onto ferry boats to go across to Benicia. Yeah, so that's a good place to stop. I wonder if there are any questions. Shigeko. You're muted.
When did the Dr. Degnam pass away, or is he still alive?
Oh, no. He passed away in 1994. 1994.
And how old was he?
He was 80.
Wow.
Yeah. He was kind of stubborn, and he was in atrial fibrillation and refused to take anticoagulants.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the standard of care these days.
Hey, and John, you mentioned the last Liberty ship, but of course the Jeremiah O'Brien is in the San Francisco harbor down by the Fisherman's Wharf, and you can go on that, and they have the whole story of the Liberty ships.
Interesting. Okay. Any other comments, questions? All right.
Where is the John Marsh house, or do you know? That big mansion.
Near Brentwood. Quite near Brentwood, but the Los Maganos, not Medanos, Maganos Rancho was all of East County initially. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, very interesting.
All right.
Yeah,
Good.
We
All right.
thanks a bunch.
live in a great county.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Okay. See y'all next week.
Bye.
Wow.